My name is Angela Reed and I just turned 32. Every year my family forgot my birthday while throwing lavish parties for my sister. This year I decided not to remind anyone. Instead, I used the $8 million reward no one knew about to buy myself a mountain retreat home in Aspen. The notifications went wild when I uploaded a photo next to my new property with the caption, "Special child celebrates alone." Again. Their furious comments started flooding in, accusing me of showing off and demanding explanations about where the money came from. I did it on purpose, and this time no one can forget that day. Before diving deeper into how I turned their neglect into my ultimate stand without a direct confrontation, I want to know what time you're listening and which city you're in. I'm thrilled to see how far my story spreads, so drop a comment below. Growing up in a gated Denver suburb felt like living in a glossy postcard where every house had a 3-car garage and neighbors competed over who threw the best 4th of July barbecue. Our sprawling 5-bedroom home was the envy of the block, all glass and stone with a backyard pool we rarely used. From the outside we were the picture-perfect family, but inside it was clear who the star was. My younger sister, 2 years my junior, the golden child everyone adored. My father, a real estate developer who'd made his fortune flipping properties during the tech boom, never missed a chance to praise my sister's potential. When she won her first spelling bee at 7, he threw a catered dinner for 50 guests complete with a custom cake shaped like a dictionary. I remember standing in the corner clutching my own award from the science fair, a solar panel model I'd spent weeks building, hoping he'd notice. He didn't. He just ruffled my hair and said, "Keep it up, kid," before turning back to the guests fawning over my sister. My mother, a former event planner who traded her career for charity boards, was even worse. She turned our living room into a shrine for my sister's achievements, shelves lined with her trophies, framed photos from dance recitals, even a newspaper clipping from when she won a local art contest. My straight-A report cards and math Olympiad medals, they were stuffed in a kitchen drawer found years later when I was looking for spare batteries. The pattern started early. On my 11th birthday, I woke up expecting pancakes or at least a card. Instead, I found my parents packing suitcases for my sister's regional dance competition. They were so focused on her costume fittings that the day passed without a single mention of me turning 11. At dinner, my mother glanced at the calendar, gasped, and said, "Oh, honey, your birthday slipped our minds. We've been swamped with the competition prep." My father promised a belated celebration, but it never happened. They were too busy posting photos of my sister's silver medal online. It wasn't just that one year. My 15th birthday was overshadowed by a weekend trip to tour a prestigious art academy for my sister. My parents decided I'd stay with my grandmother because, as my mother put it, this is a big opportunity for her future. I spent the day eating oatmeal cookies and watching old sitcoms while my social media feed filled with their proud posts about the academy visit. My 18th birthday collided with my sister's high school valedictorian speech. They threw her a backyard gala with string lights and a live quartet. I got a text from my mother the next day. "So sorry, sweetie, yesterday was a whirlwind." My best friend since kindergarten was the only one who noticed the pattern. She'd been at our house enough to see how my parents lit up for my sister's every move while I faded into the background. During sleepovers, she'd whisper, "It's not fair, Angela. You're just as amazing." Her words were a lifeline, but they couldn't erase the sting of being invisible in my own home. Family gatherings made it worse. Aunts, uncles, and cousins would swarm my sister asking about her latest art project or college applications. I'd sit at the far end of the table, picking at my food, answering the occasional question about school with a forced smile. Once at a Thanksgiving dinner, an uncle asked about my robotics club win. Before I could answer, my mother steered the conversation back to my sister's upcoming gallery showcase. The room toasted her potential while I stared at my plate. By the time I was 16, the contrast was undeniable. I started keeping a notebook, jotting down every forgotten birthday, every overlooked achievement. It wasn't about self-pity, it was about proof. Each entry fueled a quiet resolve deep inside me, a spark that said, one day I'd make them see me. Not by begging for their attention, but by building something they couldn't ignore. That spark grew stronger with every slight, every missed moment. It wasn't just about being forgotten anymore, it was about proving I was enough. By 16, the weight of being invisible in my own family had settled deep in my chest. I couldn't keep pretending it didn't hurt. My notebook of forgotten birthdays and overlooked achievements was filling up each entry, a reminder that I needed to speak up. I spent weeks rehearsing what to say, choosing words that wouldn't sound petty or jealous. One evening when my sister was at a friend's house, I found my parents in the living room, Dad reading a business magazine, Mom scrolling through her phone planning another event for my sister's art portfolio. Mom, Dad, can we talk? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Mom glanced up briefly, nodding, while Dad lowered his magazine with a sigh, already looking impatient. I took a deep breath and started. I feel like you treat me and my sister differently, like my accomplishments don't matter as much. You forget my birthdays, my awards, but everything she does gets a spotlight. My hands shook, but I kept going. It's been years, and it hurts. Mom set her phone down, her expression more annoyed than concerned. Angela, that's not true. We're proud of both our daughters, but your sister's at a critical stage. Her art could open doors to top schools. Dad chimed in, his tone dismissive. You're too sensitive. She's just more outgoing, so her achievements are more visible. You keep things to yourself. How are we supposed to celebrate what we don't see? I pushed back, my voice cracking. I've told you about my robotics wins, my straight A's. You don't even show up to my events, but you'll fly across the state for her exhibitions. Mom sighed like I was exhausting her. Sweetie, we're busy people. Your time will come. You're still young. Dad nodded, already flipping his magazine open again. Let's not make a big deal out of this. We love you both the same. The conversation ended there with empty promises that nothing changed. If anything, pointing out the unfairness made them more defensive, like I was accusing them of being bad parents. My notebook entries grew longer, detailing every slight, every missed moment. It wasn't just about keeping score, it was about holding on to my truth when they wouldn't see it. I knew then I had to get out. College was my ticket. I applied to the University of Colorado in Boulder, drawn to its engineering program and the distance from Denver just far enough to breathe, but not so far they'd accuse me of running away. When acceptance letters came, I shared the news at dinner. Mom smiled absently, saying, "That's nice, Angela," before turning to discuss my sister's upcoming gallery show. Dad didn't even look up from his steak. That night, I added another entry to my notebook: accepted to Boulder. They didn't care. Moving to Boulder at 18 felt like shedding a heavy coat. I threw myself into my computer science classes, spending late nights in the lab coding projects that made me feel alive. My professors noticed my drive, and one even recommended me for a competitive internship in my sophomore year. I called home to share the news, hoping maybe this time they'd be proud. Dad answered, sounding distracted. An internship. That's great, kid, but did you hear your sister got into that art program in New York? It's a big deal. I swallowed the lump in my throat and hung up. Birthdays in college were no better. My 19th came and went with a single text from Mom sent 2 days late. Sorry, honey, meant to call for your birthday. Been busy helping your sister settle in. My 20th coincided with my sister's first solo art exhibition. They flew to New York for it, posting glowing updates online while I celebrated alone with a cupcake from the campus cafeteria. Patricia, my best friend from back home, was the only one who remembered calling to sing an off-key happy birthday that made me laugh and cry at once. By my junior year, I landed a part-time job at a small tech startup in Boulder writing code for a machine learning app. The work was grueling, but it gave me purpose. I stopped calling home as often, tired of the same dismissive responses. When I did, the conversations always circled back to my sister, her latest art award, her gallery connections, her bright future. My achievements, like winning a coding hackathon or earning a scholarship, barely registered. Dad once said, tech's a solid field, but it's not like art. Your sister's building a legacy. Patricia became my anchor. We'd video chat late at night, her voice steady as she listened to my frustrations. They're blind, Angela, she'd say. You're killing it, and they don't deserve to know how amazing you are. Her words kept me going, but the hurt didn't fade. I kept adding to my notebook, documenting every ignored milestone, every casual slight. It was my way of holding on to my worth when my family wouldn't see it. By the time I graduated with honors at 22, I'd stopped expecting anything from them. I didn't invite them to my ceremony, knowing they'd probably be busy with my sister's latest showcase anyway. Instead, I moved to Salt Lake City for a full-time role at a growing tech firm, diving into a world where my skills were valued. My first big project, a data analytics tool, earned me praise from my team lead, but I didn't tell my parents. Why bother when they'd just compare it to my sister's next big thing? The distance helped, but the pattern continued. My 23rd birthday passed with a belated group text from Mom: "Happy birthday, Angela. Sorry, we were at your sister's gallery opening yesterday." Each forgotten day added fuel to a plan forming in my mind, not just to succeed, but to make them see what they'd ignored. I wasn't begging for their attention anymore. I was building something bigger, something undeniable, and I'd do it on my own terms. After graduating, I poured everything into my career in Salt Lake City. The tech firm I joined was fast-paced, working on cutting-edge AI tools for healthcare. I started as a junior developer, debugging code and learning from senior engineers. My first year, I stayed late most nights teaching myself advanced machine learning techniques while my peers headed to happy hours. It wasn't about outshining anyone, it was about proving to myself I could be more than the overlooked daughter. By 2020, at 27, I'd earned a reputation for solving problems others couldn't. My team lead put me on a project to develop an AI diagnostic tool for hospitals. I spent months refining algorithms, testing datasets, and presenting updates to skeptical clients. When the tool launched, successfully increasing hospital efficiency by 20%, my name started circulating in the office. My colleague Tiffany, a sharp-witted data scientist who'd become a close ally, pulled me aside after a meeting. "You're killing it, Angela. Why don't you brag about this stuff?" I shrugged, thinking of my family's dismissive reactions. "Not everyone cares," I said. She raised an eyebrow but didn't push. That project caught the eye of Andrew Hayes, the company's CTO and a tech veteran known for spotting talent. He called me into his office one afternoon, his walls lined with patents and industry awards. "Angela, your work on the diagnostic tool was exceptional," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You've got a knack for seeing what others miss. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." His words hit hard, not just praise, but a reminder to value myself. He became my mentor, pushing me to take on bigger challenges and live for my own goals, not anyone else's approval. Over the next 2 years, I climbed the ranks, leading a small team on a new AI startup project within the company. We built a platform that predicted patient outcomes using real-time data, a game changer for emergency rooms. I worked weekends, skipped vacations, and rewrote code until it was perfect. Tiffany was my sounding board, always ready to brainstorm solutions or call out my perfectionism with a laugh. "You're building an empire," Angela, she'd say over coffee. "Own it." Her confidence in me felt like a shield against the doubts my family had planted. In 2023, a major healthcare conglomerate approached us to buy the startup. I led the negotiations, presenting our platform's impact to their board. When they offered a $100 million deal, I knew my share would be life-changing. After taxes and team splits, my bonus came to $8 million, more money than I'd ever imagined. I sat in my apartment staring at the contract, heart racing. My first instinct was to call my parents to finally hear them say they were proud. But then I remembered Dad's voice from years ago. "Tech's fine, but your sister's art is a legacy." I set the phone down. I didn't tell my family about the deal. Not Mom, not Dad, not my sister. They didn't deserve to know, not after years of brushing off my wins. Instead, I confided in Tiffany over drinks at a quiet bar. "8 million, she whispered, eyes wide. "Angela, this is your moment. What's the plan?" I leaned back, a smile creeping in. "Something big. Something they can't ignore." She grinned, sensing my resolve. "Let's make it epic. How about a social media flex post, something that screams, 'You've made it,' without saying a word to them?" We spent weeks brainstorming. Tiffany suggested buying a property, a statement of success that would hit home. I'd always dreamed of a mountain retreat, a place to escape and feel free. She pulled up listings for Aspen, showing me sprawling estates with views of snow-capped peaks. "Imagine posting a photo in front of your own mansion," she said. "Caption it something bold, like you're throwing their favoritism back in their faces." I loved the idea. Not just a house, but a way to show I didn't need their validation. Andrew weighed in during one of our mentorship meetings. "You've built this success on your own terms," he said. "Whatever you do next, make it for you, not to prove anything to anyone else." His advice stuck, but I couldn't shake the urge to make my family see what they'd missed. Tiffany and I refined the plan. I'd buy a property, wait for my next birthday, the day they'd inevitably forget, and post a photo that would spark a reaction. No direct confrontation, just a move so bold they'd have to face their neglect. By early 2024, I was ready. I contacted a real estate agent in Aspen and narrowed down a list of properties. One stood out, a modern 6-bedroom estate with floor-to-ceiling windows and a private trail to the mountains. It was listed at $7.5 million, within my budget after the bonus. I kept it secret, even from Patricia, wanting to surprise her later with the full story. Every step, reviewing contracts, meeting lenders, felt like claiming a piece of my worth. My notebook, now a thick record of years of being sidelined, sat on my desk as a reminder of why I was doing this. The closer my 32nd birthday got, the clearer my plan became. I wouldn't remind my family, wouldn't drop hints. I'd let them forget, just like always. Then I'd post the photo, a single image of me in front of my new Aspen home, caption to cut deep. Tiffany helped craft it, special child celebrates alone. Again. It was sharp, deliberate, a mirror to their favoritism. The stage was set and I was ready to make them see me not as the forgotten daughter, but as someone who'd built an empire they couldn't dismiss. My 32nd birthday arrived on a crisp spring morning in Salt Lake City. I woke up to sunlight streaming through my apartment windows, but no messages from my family. Not a single text, call, or email. Just like every year, they'd forgotten. I didn't remind them, didn't drop hints in our group chat buzzing with plans for my sister's latest art gallery opening. Instead, I took the day off work, a quiet rebellion, and finalized the biggest move of my life. I'd spent weeks working with an Aspen real estate agent, signing papers for the 6-bedroom mountain estate I'd chosen. The deal closed 2 days before my birthday, funded by my $8 million bonus from the startup sale. The house was stunning, sleek lines, a stone fireplace, and a deck overlooking the Rockies. I drove up that morning, keys in hand, heart pounding with a mix of excitement and defiance. Standing in the empty living room, I felt a surge of power. This was mine, built without their approval or attention. Back in Salt Lake City that afternoon, I sat with my laptop ready to execute the plan Tiffany and I had crafted. I chose a photo from the morning, a shot of me standing on the estate's deck, the mountains glowing behind me. The caption was deliberate, sharp, special child celebrates alone. Again. I hesitated for a moment, my thumb hovering over the post button. This wasn't just a photo, it was a statement, a mirror held up to years of neglect. I hit post on Instagram, set my phone down, and waited. The notifications started within minutes. Friends liked and commented, gushing over the house, asking if it was mine. Then came my family. My sister's comment popped up first. Whose house is this? Stop showing off. Mom followed, Angela, where are you? Call me now. Dad's was blunt, this is irresponsible. Where did you get money for this? Their words dripped with disbelief, as if I couldn't possibly have achieved something this big. Each comment fueled my resolve, proof they'd taken the bait. Patricia, my best friend, was ready. She'd agreed to back me up online, a witness to my stand. She liked my post and commented, "Looks like Angela's thriving, happy birthday, queen." Her words sparked more reactions, friends piling on with birthday wishes, drowning out my family's outrage. My sister posted again, more heated, "You're making a scene on purpose. This isn't about your birthday." I didn't respond. Let them stew, I thought. By evening, my phone lit up with missed calls, 3 from Mom, 2 from Dad, even 1 from my sister. I ignored them all, savoring the silence. Mom sent a text, "Angela, we need to talk. This house thing is out of hand. Dinner tomorrow at our place, 7 sharp. No excuses." I stared at the message, a grim smile forming. They thought they could summon me, demand answers like I was still the invisible daughter. Not this time. I met Tiffany at a coffee shop the next morning to prepare. She scrolled through the comments, laughing at my family's panic. "They're freaking out because you didn't ask their permission," she said, sipping her latte. "This is perfect. You've got them rattled." I nodded, flipping through my notebook, now a thick record of every forgotten birthday, every slight. "I'm ready," I told her. "Tomorrow I'm laying it all out. No holding back." Tiffany raised her cup in a mock toast. To teaching them a lesson they won't forget. I spent the rest of the day planning my words, rehearsing how I'd confront them. My notebook was my evidence, pages filled with dates and details, birthdays, ignored achievements, dismissed years of being sidelined. I wasn't going to beg for their attention anymore. This dinner would be my stage, not theirs. I thought back to Andrew's advice, live for yourself, but this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about showing them what they'd lost by choosing my sister over me. The closer the dinner got, the calmer I felt. I wasn't nervous, not like when I was 16, pleading for them to see me. This time, I had proof of my worth, the house, the bonus, the life I'd built. My family's furious comments showed they couldn't ignore me now. They'd walked right into the trap I'd set, exposing their neglect for the world to see. Tomorrow I'd face them head on, armed with years of truth and a resolve they couldn't break. The dinner was set for 7 at my parents' Denver home, a place I hadn't visited in months. I pulled into the driveway behind my sister's sleek convertible, my stomach tight but my resolve steady. I rang the doorbell instead of using my key, a small act to remind myself I wasn't just their daughter anymore. Mom opened the door, her face a forced smile. "Angela, good you're here. Come in." The air inside was heavy, the dining room table set with her best china, like this was a formal event and not a reckoning. Dad stood by the bar cart pouring a drink, his jaw tight. My sister sat scrolling her phone, barely glancing up. The tension was palpable, but no one spoke until we sat down with plates of roasted chicken and asparagus. Dad broke the silence, his voice clipped. So Angela cared to explain that Instagram post. Whose house is that, and where did you get the money? I sipped my water, meeting his eyes. It's mine. I bought it with my own money, 7.5 million, paid with a bonus from work. My sister's fork hit her plate. 7.5 million. That's ridiculous. You're just flaunting to make us look bad. Mom's eyes widened, her voice sharp. Angela, that's a huge decision. Why didn't you tell us? I leaned back, pulling my notebook from my bag, its worn pages a testament to years of hurt. Why would I? You've never cared about my wins. Let me remind you. I opened the notebook, reading entries aloud. May 2010, my 11th birthday, forgotten because of my sister's dance competition. May 2014, my 15th, sent to grandma's for her art academy tour. May 2017, my 18th, texted a day late because of her valedictorian party. My voice stayed steady, each date a knife. I've got pages of these going back to when I was 10. Every year you prioritized her. My awards, my internships, my graduation, none of it mattered. Dad's face reddened. That's unfair. We've supported both our daughters. You're blowing this out of proportion. Mom jumped in, her tone defensive. Your sister's career is at a critical point. Art is competitive, and we had to focus on her opportunities. My sister shifted, finally speaking. Angela, I didn't know it was that bad. But you never said anything. And this house stunt. It's like you're trying to embarrass us. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Embarrass you? I posted one photo of my own home, bought with my own money, and you're the ones who lost it online. That's not my fault, it's yours for never seeing me. I flipped to a recent page. Last year, my 23rd birthday, belated text because of her gallery opening. You didn't even call, but her art show got a catered gala with 100 guests. Tell me, when was the last time you celebrated me? Mom's eyes filled with tears, but her words were weak. We didn't mean to make you feel less important. We thought you were fine on your own. Dad cut in, his lawyer voice firm. Buying a mansion without telling us is reckless. You should have consulted us. I shook my head. Consult you so you could tell me it's not as important as her next exhibit. I'm done waiting for you to care. My sister tried again, softer. I'm sorry, Angela. I didn't realize how much we hurt you. Can we fix this? For a moment, I saw guilt in her eyes, but it wasn't enough. You knew, I said. You saw the parties, the attention, and you took it. I've spent years hoping you'd notice me. I'm not hoping anymore. I closed my notebook, standing. I'm done with this family. You don't get to claim my success now that it's too big to ignore. Dad stood too, his voice rising. You're being dramatic. We've done everything for our kids. I didn't flinch. You did everything for her. I did this for myself. I grabbed my coat, walking to the door. Mom called after me, her voice breaking. Angela, please, we can do better. I turned, my words final. You had 32 years. I'm not giving you 33. Driving away, I felt lighter than I ever had. I blocked their numbers that night, every text and call cut off. Back in Salt Lake City, I focused on my new life. Patricia came to visit the Aspen house, bringing wine and a housewarming gift, a set of candles that filled the living room with a warm glow. Tiffany joined us for a weekend, toasting to my freedom on the deck under a starry sky. They were my chosen family, the ones who saw me when my blood family didn't. I started hosting friends at the estate, turning it into a sanctuary of laughter and connection. Work kept thriving. My team at the tech firm landed another major project, and I felt more confident than ever. The pain of my family's neglect didn't vanish, but it no longer defined me. I'd built a life that was mine, unshackled from their expectations. Looking back, I learned that your worth isn't tied to anyone's approval, not even your family's. I used to think if I just tried harder, they'd see me, but waiting for that only kept me small. Cutting them out wasn't easy, but it was freedom. If you're in a family that overlooks, you know this, you don't need their validation to shine. Recognize the signs of neglect, early choose people who lift you up and build a life that's yours. That's the lesson I carry, and I hope it resonates with you. Thank you for listening to my story. If it hit home, please subscribe and share your own experiences in the comments. Let's build a community that celebrates everyone's worth.
After this, I'm moving out. I've already packed. We'll talk later. The words hit me like ice water during what should have been the most beautiful moment of our daughter's wedding ceremony. Douglas leaned close to my ear as Victoria walked down the aisle in her grandmother's pearls, his breath warm against my cheek as he delivered his devastating news with the casual tone of someone discussing dinner plans. My name is Evelyn Sharp, and I'm 58 years old. For 30 years, I've been the devoted wife of Douglas Sharp, managing our home in Charleston, South Carolina, while he built his reputation as a successful commercial real estate developer. Today was supposed to be the culmination of everything we'd worked toward together, watching our only daughter marry the love of her life in the garden behind our antebellum home, surrounded by 300 guests who'd come to celebrate this milestone with our family. I kept my face serene, my hands steady as they held my small bouquet of white roses. "Of course, dear," I whispered back, my voice carrying none of the shock that was racing through my veins. Douglas straightened his tie and turned his attention back to the ceremony, apparently satisfied that he'd delivered his bombshell without causing a scene. 3 rows behind us, I could see her. Leah Morrison, his 28-year-old secretary, sitting primly in a navy dress that I now realized was far too expensive for someone earning her salary. She'd been with Bright Hollow Development for 2 years, and I'd always thought her professional and pleasant during the few times we'd met at company events. How naive I'd been. As Victoria and Thomas exchanged vows under the magnolia trees, speaking words about commitment and faithfulness that now felt like mockery, I maintained my composure. The photographer captured moment after moment, Douglas and me standing together, smiling proudly as our daughter promised to love and honor her new husband. To everyone watching, we looked like the picture of marital success, the kind of couple who'd weathered 3 decades together and emerged stronger. But something cold and calculating had already begun forming in my chest. Douglas had chosen this moment, our daughter's wedding day, to announce his betrayal. He'd waited until I was trapped in public, surrounded by family and friends, when any emotional reaction would ruin Victoria's perfect day. He thought he'd cornered me, forced me into silent acceptance of his decision. What Douglas didn't know was that I'd seen this coming months ago, and I'd been preparing. The signs had started appearing 6 months earlier, though I'd initially dismissed them as midlife restlessness. Douglas began working later, claiming urgent projects that required evening meetings. His phone, once carelessly left on kitchen counters, now stayed glued to his side. He'd upgraded his wardrobe without mentioning it, trading his comfortable khakis for tailored suits that made him look younger, more vibrant. Our relationship had never been passionate in the Hollywood sense, but it had been steady, comfortable. We'd built Bright Hollow Development together, though Douglas received all the public credit while I managed the financial side from behind the scenes. I'd sacrificed my own career aspirations as a certified public accountant to support his dreams, handling our investments, estate planning, and tax strategies while he charmed clients and closed deals. For 30 years, I'd been the perfect wife, hosting dinner parties for potential investors, managing our household staff, coordinating family vacations, and ensuring Douglas never had to worry about mundane details like bill payments or insurance renewals. I'd raised Victoria while he traveled, celebrated his successes while downplaying my own contributions, and maintained our social calendar with military precision. But something had shifted after Victoria's engagement announcement last year. Douglas became distant, distracted. He'd stare at his phone during dinner, claiming to read industry news when I could see the reflection of text messages in his wine glass. He stopped mentioning Leah by name when discussing office matters, referring to her only as my assistant, with a careful neutrality that immediately raised my suspicions. 3 months ago, I'd decided to conduct my own investigation. It started small, checking our joint credit card statements more carefully, noting charges at restaurants I'd never been to, boutiques that sold women's clothing in sizes much smaller than mine. I discovered a second cell phone bill, paid from an account I'd never seen before. When Douglas claimed he was attending a real estate conference in Atlanta, I confirmed the event had been canceled 2 months earlier. That's when I hired Catherine Webb, a private investigator recommended by my longtime attorney, Harrison Phillips. Catherine was thorough and discreet, providing me with photographs, financial records, and a timeline that painted a clear picture of Douglas's affair. Leah Morrison wasn't just his secretary. She was his mistress, his confidant, and apparently his planned future. The apartment lease Catherine uncovered was particularly revealing. Douglas had signed a year-long contract for a luxury condo downtown, listing himself and Leah as occupants. The security deposit had come from a business account he'd opened without my knowledge. Funded by money he'd systematically transferred from our joint investments. As I watched Victoria dance with Thomas during their reception, twirling in circles of ivory silk while guests applauded, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Douglas had underestimated me completely. He saw me as the passive wife who'd always accommodated his needs, who'd never question his decisions or challenge his authority. He had no idea what I was capable of when properly motivated. The revelation that shattered my remaining illusions came just 2 weeks before Victoria's wedding. I'd been reviewing our financial statements when I noticed irregular transfers. Significant amounts moved from our joint accounts to an investment fund I didn't recognize. When I called our financial advisor, Patricia Coleman, she seemed surprised by my inquiry. "I assumed you knew about the new portfolio Douglas established," Patricia said, her voice carrying a note of concern. "He specifically requested that all documentation be sent to his office address." That evening, I confronted Douglas directly. He was in his study reviewing contracts when I placed printouts of the unauthorized transfers on his desk. For a moment, his confident facade cracked, and I saw genuine surprise flash across his features. "Evelyn, these are just business investments," he said, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. "I'm diversifying our holdings to protect our retirement." "Our retirement?" I kept my tone level, professional. "These transfers are going to accounts with only your name attached, and according to Patricia, you've instructed that I be excluded from all communications regarding these investments." Douglas stood up, moving to the window that overlooked our garden. "You've always trusted me to handle the financial decisions. Why are you questioning me now?" "Because this isn't handling finances. This is hiding assets." I watched his shoulders tense as the truth settled between us. "I know about Leah, Douglas. I know about the apartment, the secret phone, all of it." He turned around slowly, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw him as a stranger. The man I'd loved and supported for 3 decades looked at me with calculation rather than affection, measuring how much damage control he'd need to manage. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "I want honesty." The words came out harder than I'd intended. "I want to know how long you've been planning to leave, and I want to know why you're stealing from our joint accounts to fund your new life." Douglas straightened, and suddenly he was the successful businessman again, the man who'd built an empire through charm and determination. "I'm not stealing anything. Those funds represent my contribution to our marriage, and I have every right to protect my interests." "Your interests?" The audacity was breathtaking. "I've been managing our finances for 30 years. I know exactly what each of us contributed, and it's not what you think." That's when I saw the first flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Douglas had always assumed I was simply paying bills and balancing checkbooks, never realizing the sophisticated web of investments, trusts, and legal protections I'd woven around our assets. He'd never bothered to understand the complexity of our financial structure, because he'd never thought he'd need to. As I left his study that night, I knew our marriage was over, but I also knew that Douglas had made a critical error. He'd underestimated the woman who'd been quietly protecting and growing our wealth for 3 decades. The weeks leading up to Victoria's wedding became a careful dance of deception on both sides. Douglas continued his charade of the devoted father, enthusiastically discussing reception details and guest arrangements while secretly finalizing his escape plan. Meanwhile, I played the role of the overwhelmed mother of the bride, using wedding preparations as cover for meetings with Harrison Phillips, my attorney, and countless hours spent documenting our financial holdings. Harrison had been our family lawyer for 15 years, but this was the first time I'd met with him privately. His office overlooked Charleston Harbor, and I found myself staring at the sailboats while he reviewed the evidence Catherine Webb had gathered. "Evelyn, what Douglas has done constitutes marital misconduct under South Carolina law," Harrison said, spreading photographs and financial documents across his mahogany desk. The secret transfers, the hidden apartment lease, the systematic depletion of joint assets, all of this supports your position in divorce proceedings. But I wasn't interested in a lengthy court battle that would inevitably become public knowledge. Douglas thrived on his reputation as a successful family man and community leader. His real estate empire depended on trust and relationships built over decades of careful image management. "I don't want to destroy him publicly," I told Harrison. "I want him to destroy himself." That's when we developed what Harrison privately called the surgical approach. Instead of fighting Douglas's asset transfers, we'd let him continue making them while ensuring he was actually transferring money he no longer legally owned. The key was restructuring our holdings before he realized what was happening. Over the next 10 days, I signed papers that moved the majority of our assets into irrevocable trusts, protected investment accounts, and legal entities that Douglas couldn't access without my explicit consent. Our family home, the vacation house on Kiowa Island, the investment properties that generated our rental income, everything was quietly shifted into structures that protected my interests, while leaving Douglas's recent transfers as evidence of attempted fraud. The most satisfying discovery came when Catherine uncovered the full extent of Douglas's financial planning. He'd been methodically moving money for months, believing he was securing his future with Leah. What he didn't realize was that most of the accounts he'd been funding were connected to assets I'd already protected through legal restructuring. "Your husband has essentially been stealing his own money and giving it to his mistress," Catherine explained with professional satisfaction. "When the divorce proceedings begin, those transfers will be viewed as dissipation of marital assets, which means he'll be required to reimburse the marital estate." Douglas's confidence during those final weeks before the wedding was almost amusing. He'd arrive home from his secret meetings with Leah looking pleased with himself, probably imagining how smoothly his transition would proceed. He'd established a new life, secured his finances, and timed his announcement to minimize my ability to interfere. At Victoria's rehearsal dinner, I watched him give a heartfelt speech about love, commitment, and the importance of family. He spoke eloquently about the marriage he and I had built, praising my dedication and support while guests applauded his apparent devotion. Later, I saw him check his phone repeatedly, probably coordinating final details with Leah about their post-wedding plans. The irony was exquisite. Douglas was celebrating his own destruction while believing he was orchestrating his liberation. 2 days before the wedding, I made my final preparation. In a safety deposit box downtown, I placed copies of all financial documents, evidence of Douglas's affair, and a detailed timeline of his asset transfers. I also deposited the divorce papers Harrison had prepared, along with a comprehensive asset list that would shock Douglas when he finally understood the scope of his miscalculation. On the morning of Victoria's wedding, I woke up before dawn and reviewed everything one final time. In a few hours, Douglas would deliver his carefully planned announcement, believing he held all the cards. He had no idea that I'd been preparing for this moment for months, that every move he'd made had been anticipated and countered. The wedding ceremony proceeded flawlessly, despite Douglas's devastating whisper. Victoria looked radiant as she promised to love Thomas through every challenge life might bring them, their words carrying weight that felt almost prophetic given the drama unfolding in the front row. I maintained my composure throughout the service, smiling at appropriate moments and dabbing my eyes with a handkerchief when Victoria's voice broke with emotion during her vows. After the ceremony, the photography session became a surreal exercise in pretense. Douglas and I posed together for family portraits, his arm around my waist as if nothing had changed between us. When the photographer requested a picture of just the parents, Douglas smiled warmly and pulled me closer, playing his role as the devoted husband perfectly. "Beautiful ceremony," Leah commented when she approached us during the cocktail hour, her voice carefully neutral. "Victoria looks absolutely stunning." "Thank you," I replied pleasantly, noting how Douglas's jaw tightened slightly when she spoke. "We're so proud of her." The three of us stood there for a moment, an awkward triangle of civility masking the explosive truth beneath. Leah excused herself quickly, probably sensing the tension she couldn't quite identify. During dinner, Douglas delivered another performance worthy of an award. He stood to give the traditional father's speech, his voice strong and emotional as he spoke about watching Victoria grow up, about the pride he felt in the woman she'd become. He thanked me publicly for being the heart of our family and the woman who made all of this possible. The applause was thunderous, and several guests approached me afterward to comment on what a wonderful marriage Douglas and I had, how lucky Victoria was to have parents who clearly adored each other after so many years. Each compliment felt like a small blade, but I smiled graciously and accepted their praise while planning Douglas's downfall. As the evening progressed, I noticed Douglas checking his watch repeatedly. He'd probably promised Leah they'd leave together once the reception wound down, finally beginning their new life as a couple. Every few minutes, his eyes would find her across the room, and I could see the anticipation building in his expression. The moment I'd been waiting for came during the last dance. While Victoria and Thomas swayed to their wedding song, surrounded by family and friends who'd gathered to celebrate their love, Douglas leaned close to me again. "I know this is difficult," he said quietly, "but I think it's better this way. Clean break, no prolonged arguments or negotiations." "I agree completely," I replied, my voice steady. "A clean break is exactly what we need." Douglas looked surprised by my calm response, probably expecting tears or pleas for reconsideration. "I'm glad you understand. I was worried you might make this complicated." "Oh, Douglas," I said softly, turning to meet his eyes directly. "I would never make things complicated for you." Something in my tone must have registered, because his confident expression flickered slightly. But before he could respond, Victoria and Thomas approached us, glowing with happiness and ready to begin their honeymoon departure tradition. As we waved goodbye to the newlyweds, Douglas standing beside me with rice in his hair and his arm around my shoulders for the final photographs, I felt a sense of completion. Victoria was safely married and departing for her honeymoon in Italy. The guests were beginning to leave, thanking us for a beautiful celebration, and Douglas was about to discover that his carefully orchestrated escape plan had been an elaborate trap of his own making. After the last guest departed and the catering staff finished cleaning up, Douglas and I found ourselves alone in our garden for the first time since his morning announcement. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, looking relaxed and pleased with how smoothly the day had proceeded. "That went well," he said, surveying the remnants of Victoria's reception. "She looked happy." "She did," I agreed, then turned to face him directly. "I believe you mentioned we needed to talk." Douglas's expression shifted, becoming more serious as he prepared for what he clearly expected to be a difficult but manageable conversation. "Evelyn, I know this comes as a shock, but I think if we handle this maturely, we can minimize the disruption for everyone involved." "I appreciate your concern for minimizing disruption," I said, reaching into my small evening purse to retrieve a manila envelope I'd carried throughout the entire wedding. "I've prepared something that should help with that." Douglas looked puzzled as I handed him the envelope. "What's this?" "Everything you'll need for your fresh start," I replied calmly, "including some documents I think you should review immediately." His confusion deepened as he opened the envelope and began examining the contents. I watched his face carefully, noting the exact moment when his confidence began to crack. It started with a small frown as he read the first page, then progressed to genuine alarm as he flipped through the divorce papers Harrison had prepared. "This is dated 3 weeks ago," Douglas said slowly, his voice carrying the first hint of uncertainty I'd heard from him all day. "Yes, I filed them the day after I discovered your secret apartment lease," I explained pleasantly. "Keep reading. The asset list is particularly interesting." Douglas's hands were shaking slightly as he reached the financial documentation. I'd included copies of every transfer he'd made, every hidden account he'd opened, and every penny he'd moved to fund his new life with Leah. But more importantly, I'd included the legal documents showing how those assets had been restructured months before his transfers began. "You can't do this," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "These accounts, these investments, I established them. The money came from our joint holdings." "Actually, Douglas, if you look more carefully at the dates, you'll see that I restructured our holdings well before you began your unauthorized transfers." I kept my tone conversational, as if we were discussing gardening rather than his financial ruin. "What you've been moving for the past 6 months is money you no longer had legal access to." The color was draining from his face as the implications sank in. The house, the business accounts, the investment properties, all protected through irrevocable trusts and legal entities that require my consent for any transactions. I watched him flip frantically through the papers, searching for some loophole or error he could exploit. "Your transfers to Leah's accounts constitute fraud under South Carolina law. Harrison has already filed the appropriate paperwork with the district attorney's office." Douglas looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Genuine fear mixed with dawning comprehension of how completely he'd been outmaneuvered. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to protect myself properly," I replied. "Long enough to ensure that your betrayal couldn't destroy what I've spent 30 years building." For a moment, we stood in silence among the scattered rose petals and empty champagne glasses, the ruins of Victoria's perfect wedding, serving as backdrop to the end of our marriage. Douglas's panic was immediate and complete. He stood among the remnants of our daughter's wedding reception, clutching the divorce papers while his entire world crumbled around him. The confident man who'd whispered his escape plan during Victoria's ceremony had been replaced by someone desperate and cornered. "Evelyn, please," he said, his voice cracking. "We can work this out. I'll call off the apartment. I'll end things with Leah. We don't have to destroy everything we've built." I looked at him with genuine pity. Even now, facing the complete collapse of his plans, Douglas still didn't understand the magnitude of his miscalculation. He thought this was about jealousy or wounded pride, something that could be smoothed over with apologies and promises. "Douglas, you chose to end our marriage the moment you whispered your announcement during our daughter's wedding ceremony," I said quietly. "You chose to steal from our joint accounts to fund your affair. You chose to hide assets and plan your future without any consideration for the woman who spent 30 years supporting your dreams." His hands trembled as he flipped through the financial documents again, probably hoping he'd misunderstood something crucial. "The business, our reputation. If this becomes public, it'll destroy everything." "It doesn't have to become public," I replied. "If you sign the divorce agreement and cooperate with the asset recovery process, we can handle this discreetly. But if you choose to fight these proceedings, every detail of your affair and financial misconduct will become part of the public record." Douglas's face went pale as the full scope of his predicament became clear. He'd planned his escape so carefully, but he'd never anticipated that his quiet, supportive wife might be planning her own counter-strategy. The woman he'd taken for granted for 3 decades had systematically dismantled his future while smiling graciously at wedding guests. "How did you know?" he asked desperately. "I've always known who you really are, Douglas," I said with finality. "The question is whether you're going to accept responsibility for your choices or make this even uglier than it needs to be." The aftermath unfolded exactly as Harrison had predicted. By Monday morning, Douglas discovered that his access to every significant account had been terminated. The business credit cards he'd used for his secret transactions were canceled, the investment portfolios he'd counted on were legally protected, and the apartment he'd leased for himself and Leah was being investigated for fraudulent funding sources. Leah Morrison submitted her resignation from Bright Hollow Development that same week, probably realizing that her association with Douglas had become a professional liability. The private investigator Catherine had documented their relationship thoroughly, creating a trail of evidence that would make any future employment in Charleston's tight-knit business community extremely difficult. Douglas attempted to salvage his situation by contacting our mutual friends and business associates, hoping to garner sympathy for his position. But word of his affair and financial misconduct spread quickly through Charleston social circles, and the man who'd built his reputation on trustworthiness found himself increasingly isolated. The fraud investigation Harrison had initiated proceeded methodically. Douglas's unauthorized transfers were easily documented, and his attempts to hide assets actually strengthened the case against him. Within 2 weeks, he was facing potential criminal charges in addition to the civil proceedings. I, meanwhile, maintained my dignity throughout the process. I attended Victoria's post-wedding brunch as planned, graciously accepting congratulations from friends who hadn't yet heard about Douglas's departure. When asked about his absence, I simply explained that he was dealing with urgent business matters. The irony wasn't lost on me. After 30 years of supporting Douglas's career and reputation, I was now the one protecting the family name while he destroyed everything he'd claimed to value. His carefully planned escape had become a public humiliation that would follow him for years. By the time Victoria returned from her honeymoon, Douglas had quietly settled the divorce agreement rather than face a public trial that would have exposed every detail of his betrayal. As I sit in my garden 6 months later, watching the magnolias bloom where Victoria danced on her wedding day, I realize that Douglas's betrayal was actually a gift. It freed me to discover my own strength and independence after decades of living in someone else's shadow. Sometimes the most devastating betrayals become the foundation for our greatest victories.